somewhere between winter and spring. Something changed in Elena. It wasn't loud, and it wasn't sudden. There was no slam of a door or a dramatic fight under dim kitchen lights. It was quieter than that, like a shift in gravity. Like the way your favorite mug slowly develops a crack you don't see until your coffee's already leaking onto your desk. We had been living together for almost 2 years, in a too-small apartment above a bookstore that smelled like paper and cinnamon. The place was never clean, never quiet, but it felt like us, cluttered, imperfect, real. I used to catch her humming in the mornings, hair wrapped in a towel, swaying slightly as she made tea in her faded college hoodie. It was one of the quiet joys of my life. Those early hours where the world hadn't quite begun, and we were still just two people trying to build something that felt like forever. But lately, her mornings were silent. She still made tea, but the humming had stopped. The small smiles, the casual touches. It was like someone had turned down the volume on her, just a little, but enough that I noticed. Her hands still moved the same way, but her eyes didn't linger. Her kisses landed soft but hollow, like she was reading a script, hitting the marks without the meaning. I told myself it was work. She'd recently been given more responsibility at the firm, late nights, early meetings, constant calls. Her sleep schedule became erratic, and her phone never left her side. I would have believed the stress excused completely if it weren't for the way she laughed at her screen sometimes. Not like she was watching something funny, more like she was being seen, wanted. I didn't want to pry. I've always hated the idea of becoming someone else's detective. I believed in giving space, trusting that when the time was right, she'd talk to me. And she did talk, just not about anything that mattered. We discussed groceries, chores, that leaky pipe under the sink. She asked about my work, nodded in all the right places, but never really listened. Her eyes drifted often toward her phone, toward the window, toward somewhere I couldn't follow. Sometimes in the middle of the night, I'd wake up and find her sitting on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, thumb frozen mid-scroll, her face blank, unreadable. "Everything okay?" I'd whisper. "Just couldn't sleep," she'd murmur back, slipping under the covers without another word. I didn't press. I was scared that if I asked for the truth, I'd get it. The thing is, you don't notice the exact moment someone starts to leave. You just start making excuses for their absence. And I had a lot of excuses. Work, stress, hormones, the weather, anything to explain why her eyes no longer held the same warmth, why her hugs felt more like rituals than comforts. I told myself she still loved me. Maybe she did. Or maybe she loved the version of me she remembered, the one who hadn't yet noticed how the walls were starting to thin between us. But love, real love, doesn't vanish overnight. It dissolves. One silent breakfast at a time. One unanswered. "How was your day?" One more night spent staring at the back of someone you used to feel at home with. And still I stayed. Because when you built your life around someone, even the cracks feel like part of the design. You don't realize how much space a person takes up in your world until you begin to lose them in pieces. Not all at once, no. Elena didn't disappear like a light going out. She dimmed. There were 1,000 little nothings that began to feel like something. The way she started taking her coffee, to go, instead of sitting with me on the balcony like we used to, how her responses to, "I love you" became soft, automatic. "Me too," instead of "I love you too." It was subtle like erosion, like wind smoothing away the edges of something once sharp and sure. We still had our routines. Friday night takeout, Sunday morning laundry, but they'd grown brittle, performative. It was like watching a stage play you'd seen too many times, waiting for a plot twist that never came. And then there were the phones. God, the phones. I never thought of myself as insecure. I never cared much about lock screens or late-night scrolling. But when you sit across from someone who used to make eye contact while they spoke, really looked at you, and now they're half listening, thumb flicking over glass, it does something to you. She started smiling at messages she wouldn't show me, turning away when they came in, replying just a little too fast. Sometimes her phone would buzz, and she'd press the power button before even glancing up at me. I told myself it was harmless. I wanted to believe the best, Because that's what you do when you're in love. You give the benefit of the doubt, even when doubt is all you have left. One night, while she was in the shower, her phone lit up on the kitchen counter. I didn't touch it. I just stared at the name that flashed across the screen. Lucas. No last name. Just a name I'd never heard before. Followed by a message that would haunt me more for its casual tone than anything explicit. Can't stop thinking about earlier. When can we talk? I remember the moment vividly. The hum of the fridge, the dripping of the faucet, the sound of water running down the drain in the next room. Everything ordinary, everything intimate, and yet suddenly none of it felt mine anymore. When she came out, wrapped in a towel, hair wet, cheeks flushed from the heat of the water, I looked at her like a stranger had walked into my home. She smiled, kissed my shoulder, asked what movie I wanted to watch. I said nothing, not because I didn't have questions, but because I already knew the answers. And still, I didn't confront her. Not that night, not the next. Instead, I folded myself into the quiet. I watched, I listened, I waited. I needed to be sure. And maybe, deep down, I needed her to confess on her own, to give me some part of her that still believed I deserved the truth. That moment didn't come. Not yet. Instead, more changes followed. She bought new clothes, started wearing perfume again, left the house with a kind of nervous energy I hadn't seen since our first dates. It wasn't for me. I knew that. It's strange how much you can forgive when you're afraid of letting go. I kept holding on, trying to grip what was left, even as it slipped through my fingers like sand. But the thing about pretending everything is fine is that it exhausts you, and eventually, pretending becomes impossible. It was raining the night everything fell apart. Not a dramatic storm, just a steady drizzle that blurred the windows and turned streetlights into soft, weeping halos. The kind of rain that keeps secrets, that muffles everything but your own thoughts. I had come home early. Not by design. It was a canceled meeting, the kind of thing that would have thrilled me months ago. More time with her, more hours shared in our small world. But as I turned the key in the lock, I felt something tighten in my chest. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was the kind of knowing that comes only after months of willful blindness. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. No music. No kettle whistling. Just a low murmur of voices behind the closed bedroom door. I stood still for a moment, just listening. Her voice, soft and warm, like it used to be with me. And a man's voice, low, easy, confident. Familiar in that unsettling way something becomes when it doesn't belong. I didn't move. Not right away. I should have barged in, demanded answers. Instead, I stood there, staring at the books on our shelf. The photo of us from last summer smiling by the sea, the half-dead plant she swore she'd revive one day. I was shaking, but not with anger, with grief. A grief so pure and quiet it didn't need words. When the door opened and they saw me, the world stopped. His name was Lucas. The name I'd seen. The name I'd feared. He froze. She gasped, eyes wide, mouth open, but no sound came, like the guilt had stolen her breath. He left first. Coward. Didn't look me in the eye. Just brushed past like I was furniture. Elena tried to speak, but all that came out was my name. A whisper. An apology dressed in disbelief. I didn't yell. I didn't ask why. I simply walked past her, picked up my coat, and left. I remember the sound of rain on my shoulders, the way my shoes soaked through in seconds. I remember the smell of the air, wet asphalt, jasmine from the neighbor's garden, betrayal. I walked for hours. No direction, just the rhythm of my footsteps and the storm inside me. When I came back, she was sitting on the couch, knees drawn to her chest, face pale and hollow. She had cried. Good. But I didn't care. Please, she said. Just that one word. Like it held all the apologies she couldn't form. I looked at her and felt nothing. Not hatred. Not rage. Just the echo of a life that was no longer mine. Was it worth it? I asked. She didn't answer, because she knew it didn't matter. The days that followed were weightless. Not because they were easy, Grief is never easy, but because everything that had tethered me to the life I knew had been cut. The routines, the familiar sounds of her laughter, the phantom feeling of her hand in mine, all gone. She texted, called, left voicemails at 2 a.m. that started with sobs and ended in silence. She sent long messages explaining, then apologizing, then begging. She even tried to sound casual at one point, as if this could all be undone by pretending it hadn't happened. "It was a mistake," she wrote. "It didn't mean anything. I miss you. You know I love you." But I didn't reply, because mistake doesn't explain a choice made over and over again. It doesn't cover late-night whispers, secret smiles, or unlocked bedroom doors. It doesn't excuse the way she let another man into the space we had built from laughter, compromise, and Sunday breakfast. It wasn't just betrayal. It was erosion. And by the time she noticed the damage, there was nothing left to salvage. We met once, weeks later. Her idea, a quiet cafe we used to love, now tainted by awkward stares and unspoken history. She looked tired, as though guilt had hollowed her out. I didn't feel triumphant, just sad. She cried again, told me it had been a moment of weakness, that she'd been feeling lonely, that I had become too predictable, too steady, as if those were sins. I didn't think it would matter, she admitted, eyes red. I thought I could come back to you, that you'd forgive me. And that's when I realized something. She hadn't just betrayed me. She had expected forgiveness, counted on it, like I was a checkpoint in a game, a place of return to once the thrill wore off. Safe, familiar, but I wasn't her home anymore. I looked at her then, really looked at her, this woman I had once imagined a life with, and felt nothing but exhaustion. "You left me before he ever touched you," I said quietly. "You just never had the courage to admit it." She tried to speak, but I stood up, paid for her coffee, mine untouched, and walked away. The hardest part wasn't leaving her. It was accepting that the version of us I'd been holding on to only ever existed in my memory. And now, when people ask me why I didn't take her back, why I didn't let her prove she'd changed, I just smile. Because some things, once broken, don't make a sound. They just stop being whole. AITA for not taking her back? Some people think so. They say I should have given her another chance. That love means forgiveness. But to me, love also means respect. And once that's gone, everything else is just noise.